Inflammatory bowel disease. Introduction. The term inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, is reserved for conditions characterized by the presence of idiopathic intestinal inflammation. Conditions such as infective or ischemic enteritis are covered in chapters 6, 74 and 77. Crohn's disease, CD, may affect any portion of the gastrointestinal tract from mouth to anus, most typically the distal ileum, the anal canal and the large bowel, whereas ulcerative colitis, UC, is confined to the large intestine. UC is characterized primarily by mucosal inflammation, whereas CD most typically involves transmural inflammation. On occasion there may be difficulty distinguishing UC from CD in the colon. This occurs in approximately 10% of patients with colitis. In such instances the term indeterminate colitis, IC, may be used. The incidence and prevalence of IBD is highest in Europe and North America, where it affects around 3 in 1,000 people. The overall incidence is steadily rising worldwide, linked to improved public hygiene, dietary changes and industrialization. Both UC and CD occur in individuals who may have a genetic predisposition and who are exposed to environmental factors that trigger abnormal immune responses that lead to intestinal inflammation. Microscopic colitis includes two main subtypes, lymphocytic colitis and collagenous colitis, CC. The etiology is uncertain but may reflect inappropriate immune responses to alterations in the gut microenvironment consequent to oral drug ingestion, particularly non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. UC is characterized by mucosal inflammation of the large bowel, always involving the rectum, proctitis, and extending to involve varying degrees of more proximal colon, colitis. When the entire colon and rectum are involved, pancolitis, some patients may also have a degree of backwash ileitis, in which there is secondary inflammation in the terminal ileum. UC is a chronic condition that tends to be relapsing in remitting. Early relapse and persistent disease within the first 2 years of diagnosis are both predictors of a severe disease course. The extent of disease may also change after initial diagnosis. Half of patients with UC affecting the rectum or rectosigmoid progress to develop more proximal disease. Histological hallmarks of UC typically include atrophy and distortion of the crypts, irregularity of the mucosal villi, marked infiltration of plasma cells within the deep laminar propria, basal plasmacytosis, and mucus depletion, but none of these is pathognomonic. The diagnosis ultimately depends on clinical correlation, disease course and elimination of other potential causes, especially infection, figure 75.1. Pseudopolyposis occurs in almost 1/4 of cases. Structuring in UC is very unusual, unlike in CD, and should prompt urgent assessment because of the possibility of coexisting carcinoma. A small proportion of patients develop irregular mucosal swellings, dysplasia-associated lesions or mass, DALMs, which are highly predictive of coexisting carcinoma. CD, Crohn's disease, regional enteritis, is characterized by discontinuous transmural inflammation of the bowel caused by transmural inflammation of any part of the gastrointestinal tract from mouth to anus, but most commonly the ileocecal region, colon and anus. There is often a degree of rectal sparing when the colon is involved. The transmural inflammation may be patchy, rather than diffuse, and crypt distortion is commonly seen. Histology typically demonstrates discontinuous segments of disease or skip lesions, involvement of the terminal ileum and the presence of granulomas with a tendency for more marked inflammation in the proximal colon, figure 75.2. Clinical correlation of histopathology with endoscopic and radiological findings is key to clinching the diagnosis of CD. Structuring in the colon, while usually benign in CD, may mask an underlying neoplasm. When endoscopic and histological appearances do not categorically confirm either UC or CD, and the term IC is used, the clinical phenotype may help deepen the diagnosis, especially if there are features of small bowel or perianal disease suggestive of CD. Patients with IC may later come to a definitive diagnosis of UC or CD, depending on the disease course. Clinical manifestations. The clinical manifestations of IBD primarily depend on the diagnosis, either CD or UC, the location, small or large intestine, or both, and the extent of the disease. In the large bowel, the clinical presentation depends in large part on the extent of disease. If inflammation is confined to the rectum, proctitis, there is usually no systemic upset and extra-alimentary manifestations are rare. The main symptoms are rectal bleeding, tenesmus and mucus discharge. The disease often remains confined to the rectum, usually with a benign course. Colitis is almost always associated with bloody diarrhea and urgency. Severe and/or extensive colitis may result in anemia, hypoproteinemia and electrolyte disturbances. Pain is unusual. Children with poorly controlled colitis may have impaired growth. The more extensive the disease, the more likely extraintestinal manifestations are to occur. Extensive colitis is also associated with systemic illness, characterized by malaise, loss of appetite and fever. Classification of severity. The assessment of the severity of colitis is determined by the frequency of bowel action and the presence of systemic signs of illness, as originally proposed by Truelove and Witz. Filled circle mild disease is characterized by fewer than 4 stools daily, with or without bleeding. There are no systemic signs of toxicity. Filled circle moderate disease corresponds to more than 4 stools daily, but with few signs of systemic illness. There may be mild anemia. Abdominal pain may occur. Inflammatory markers, including erythrocyte sedimentation rate and C-reactive protein, are often raised. Filled circle severe disease corresponds to more than 6 bloody stools a day and evidence of systemic illness, with fever, tachycardia, anemia and raised inflammatory markers. Hypoalbuminemia is common and an ominous offending. Filled circle fulminant disease is associated with more than 10 bowel movements daily, fever, tachycardia, continuous bleeding, anemia, hypoalbuminemia, abdominal tenderness and distension, the need for blood transfusion and, in the most severe cases, progressive colonic dilation, toxic megacolon. This is a very significant offending, suggestive of disintegrative colitis, and an indication for emergency surgery if colonic perforation is to be avoided. Extraintestinal manifestations. Arthritis occurs in around 15% of patients and is typically an asymmetrical large joint polyarthropathy, affecting knees, ankles, elbows and wrists. Sacroiliitis and ankylosing spondylitis are 20 times more common in patients with UC than in the general population and are associated with the HLA-B27 genotype. Sclerosing cholangitis is associated with UC and can progress to cirrhosis and hepatocellular failure. Cholangiocarcinoma is a rare association, but its frequency is not influenced by colectomy, see Chapter 71. The skin lesions erythema nodosum and pyoderma gangrenosum are associated with UC and both normally resolve with good colitis control. The eyes can be affected by uveitis and episcleritis. Acute colitis. Approximately 5% of patients present with acute severe fulminant colitis. Intensive medical treatment leads to remission in 70%, but the remainder require urgent surgery. Toxic dilatation should be suspected in patients who develop severe abdominal pain and confirmed by the presence on a plain abdominal radiograph of a colon with a diameter of more than 6 cm, figure 75.3. A reduction in stool frequency is not always a sign of improvement in patients with acute severe colitis, and a falling stool frequency, abdominal distension and abdominal pain, resulting from progression of THE. Inflammatory process through the colonic wall, are strongly suggestive of fulminant colitis and impending perforation. Plain abdominal radiographs or abdominal computed tomography (CT) may help monitor disease progression in patients with acute severe colitis, and a progressive increase in colon diameter despite medical therapy is an indication for urgent surgery. Colonic perforation is a grave complication with a mortality rate of 40%. Steroids may mask the physical signs. Severe hemorrhage is uncommon, 1–2%, but may occasionally require urgent surgical intervention. Cancer risk in colitis. The risk of cancer in ulcerative colitis increases with duration. Figure 75.3 supine abdominal radiograph of the risk of cancer in ulcerative colitis increases with duration. Figure 75. Of disease. At 10 years from diagnosis, it is approximately 1%, increasing to 10 to 15% at 20 years and 20% at 30 years. Patients with pancolitis, DFNID is the presence of inflammation proximal to the splenic flexure, of more than 10 years duration should be entered into endoscopic screening programs in order to detect clinically silent dysplasia, which is predictive of increased cancer risk. The value of screening programs remains somewhat controversial, as most patients with UC who develop cancer, approximately 3.5% of all patients, present between attendances for screening colonoscopy. Malignant change, often atypical and high-grade, may be multifocal or submucosal, figure 75.4. Colonoscopic surveillance with dye spray, chromoendoscopy, or multiple biopsies every 10 cm should look for subtle mucosal abnormalities, which can occur in fat mucosa or a DALM. Patients with UC and sclerosing cholangitis are also at a significantly greater risk of development of large bowel cancer. Investigations. Endoscopy and biopsy. Rigid, flexible sigmoidoscopy can detect proctitis in the clinic. The mucosa is hyperemic, bleeds on touch, and there may be a purulent exudate. Where there has been remission and relapse, there may be regenerative mucosal nodules or pseudopolyps. Later, tiny ulcers may be seen that appear to coalesce. Colonoscopy with biopsy has a key role in diagnosis and management. Filled circle to establish the extent of inflammation, although colonoscopy is contraindicated in severe acute colitis because of the risk of colonic perforation. Filled circle to distinguish between UC and Crohn's colitis, table 75.1, filled circle to monitor the response to treatment, filled circle to assess long-standing cases for malignant change. Endoscopic findings can be combined with clinical features and the physician's assessment to produce a disease activity score. The most widely used is the Mayo score, which provides a useful tool for measuring disease progression or response to treatment. Radiology. A plain abdominal FLM may indicate the severity of disease in the acute setting and is particularly valuable in demonstrating the development of toxic megacolon. Barium enema has been replaced by CT, although a contrast study will show a featureless colon. CT findings in pancolitis may show significant thickening of the colonic wall, as well as inflammatory stranding in the colonic mesentery, figure 75.5. Bacteriology. A stool specimen should be sent for microbiological analysis when UC is suspected in order to exclude infective colitis, notably Campylobacter, which may be very difficult to distinguish from acute severe UC. Clostridium difficile colitis may need to be considered in populations at risk of this disease, see Chapter 77. Cytomegalovirus infection is a major pathogen in immunocompromised patients and can be difficult to distinguish from UC. Superimposed infection may precipitate fulminant colitis. Treatment. Effective treatment of UC requires a multidisciplinary approach to management. Members of the IBD multidisciplinary team typically include specialists in IBD gastroenterology, colorectal surgery, IBD nursing, stoma therapy, gastrointestinal and interventional radiology, pathology, dietitians and nutritional support services, clinical psychologists and other specialties according to the individual patient's need. Principles of management of ulcerative colitis. Filled circle. Most patients are maintained on optimized medical therapy. Filled circle. Acute severe colitis (USH) requires multidisciplinary management. Filled circle. Toxic dilatation or impending complication should be suspected if the patient develops abdominal tenderness or distension, or deteriorates clinically. Filled circle. Patients with colitis are at increased risk of developing cancer. Those with pancolitis of long duration are most at risk. Medical treatment. Improved understanding of the complex cell signaling pathways that underlie aberrant immune responses in both UC and CD has radically changed treatment algorithms. The focus is now on both clinical and endoscopic remission endpoints with the aim of controlling symptoms and preventing disease progression. The particular choice of anti-inflammatory agent or immunosuppressive drug, the sequence and combination of use must take into account individual disease phenotypes, coexisting conditions, patient preferences, response to treatment, side effects and treatment availability. There has been a paradigm shift in treatment algorithms from escalation therapy in response to treatment failure to a top-down approach predicated on achieving clinical and endoscopic remission with subsequent de-escalation of treatment to maintain remission. Conventional FRST line treatment has been 5-aminosalicylic acid, 5-ASA, derivatives given topically, per rectum, or systemically. These act as inhibitors of the cyclooxygenase enzyme system and are formulated to protect the aspirin-related drug from degradation before reaching the colon. Used as a single agent, 5-ASA is useful in treating ulcerative proctitis and as maintenance therapy following induction of remission. Corticosteroids have been the mainstay of treatment used either topically or systemically. They have a widespread anti-inflammatory action and are frequently used in combination with 5-ASA derivatives to deliver prompt relief of symptoms. The immunosuppressive drugs azathioprine and cyclosporin can be used to maintain remission, and as steroid-sparing agents should maintenance therapy be required. Azathioprine is a purine analog that is metabolized to 6-mercaptopurine, 6-MP, and works by inhibiting cell-mediated immune responses. 6-MP may be given directly for the same effects. Approximately 10% of people have deficient thiopurine methyltransferase, TPMT, and 1 in 300 people have no enzyme activity, causing inefficient metabolism of 6-MP. The resulting high pharmacological concentrations may cause adverse effects such as myelosuppression. Testing of TPMT activity should be undertaken before commencing treatment. Cyclosporin acts by inhibiting cell-mediated immunity. Short-course intravenous cyclosporin treatment is associated with remission in 80% of patients. However, many patients relapse after completion of treatment. The monoclonal antibodies infliximab and adalimumab. Figure 75.5 both act as antagonists to tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF-alpha, which has a central role in inflammatory cascades. Infliximab, a murine chimeric monoclonal antibody, was the FRST available monoclonal antibody for the treatment of CD. It is administered as an intravenous infusion most frequently to induce remission in moderate to severe disease and may be used as maintenance treatment once remission has been achieved. Adalimumab, an entirely human monoclonal antibody, is an alternative to infliximab that also targets TNF-alpha. It can be self-administered by patients, which is advantageous in long-term maintenance. Trough levels in antibodies to anti-TNF-alpha monoclonal antibodies should be monitored to ensure optimal dosing and efficacy of treatment. Recently, ustekinumab, a monoclonal antibody against interleukin-12/23, vedolizumab and etrolizumab, anti-integrin monoclonal antibodies, tofacitinib, a JAK, Janus kinase inhibitor, and ozanimod, an S1P, SPHINGOSINE1 phosphate receptor modulator have received regulatory approval for treatment of IBD. The complexity and best sequencing of treatment options requires multidisciplinary specialist input and is beyond the remit of this chapter. See further reading. Nutritional support. It is essential that nutritional status is evaluated in all patients with IBD. Nutritional support is frequently required. Patients with moderate nutritional impairment will require nutritional supplementation, and severely malnourished patients may require enteral tube or even intravenous feeding. Anemia, hypoproteinemia and electrolyte, vitamin and metabolic bone problems must all be addressed. Nutritional optimization has been shown to improve surgical outcomes, but it is important to recognize that a significant improvement in nutritional status is very unlikely in the setting of active infection. In patients with abscesses, effective drainage remains the overwhelming priority. Acute severe colitis patients with a mild attack usually respond to a course of oral prednisolone. A moderate attack often responds to oral prednisolone, twice-daily steroid enemas and 5-ASA. Failure to achieve remission as an outpatient is an indication for admission. Acute severe colitis occurs in up to 10% of patients who require hospital admission. Regular assessment of vital signs, weight and the abdomen are required. A stool chart should be kept. Regular clinical review is required, and supine abdominal radiographs should be done when there is clinical concern for toxic megacolon. The presence of mucosal islands or intramural gas on plain radiographs, increasing colonic diameter or a sudden increase in pulse and temperature may indicate impending colonic perforation. Limited endoscopic assessment and reassessment is useful in monitoring response to treatment. Fluid and electrolyte balance must be maintained. Anemia corrected and adequate nutrition provided, often parenterally. Initial treatment is with intravenous steroids. Regular and joint review by a gastroenterologist and a colorectal surgeon is essential to identify patients who are failing to make anticipated progress and to ensure that surgery is neither inappropriately delayed nor inappropriately undertaken. Patients should be supported by IBD specialist nurses, and early introduction to a stoma therapist is considered best practice. Instigation of immunosuppressive therapy with either intravenous cyclosporin A or an anti-TNF-alpha agent may be appropriate. However, surgery should be considered if rescue therapy does not result in rapid clinical improvement for the patient. Clinical deterioration requires urgent colectomy. Indications for surgery. Surgery has a significant role in managing complications of IBD and in improving quality of life for patients with IBD. Current best practice ensures that surgeons and stoma therapists are an integral part of the multidisciplinary team throughout a patient's journey, and that surgery is not presented as a last resort. Patients are then more likely to accept timely surgical intervention when indicated and be better prepared for life with a temporary or permanent stoma. The overall lifetime risk of colectomy for a patient with UC is about 20%. Common indications for surgery in the emergency setting include refractory acute severe colitis or its complications, including perforation, toxic megacolon, or, rarely, colonic hemorrhage not controlled by endoscopic or interventional radiological means. The indications for surgery in UC are filled circle severe or fulminating disease failing to respond to medical therapy. Filled circle chronic disease with anemia, frequent stools, urgency and tenesmus. Steroid-dependent disease where remission cannot be maintained without substantial doses of steroids with harmful side effects. Filled circle intolerance or side effects of medical therapy required to control the disease, e.g. steroid psychosis, azathioprine-induced pancreatitis. Filled circle growth retardation in children or adolescents. Filled circle neoplastic change, patients who have severe dysplasia or carcinoma. Filled circle associated sclerosing cholangitis. Filled circle extraintestinal manifestations. filled circle rarely, severe hemorrhage or stenosis causing obstruction. Operative treatment emergency in the emergency situation, or for a patient who is malnourished or on high-dose steroids, the safest procedure is subtotal colectomy and end ileostomy. The rectosigmoid remnant may be left long and can either be brought out as a formal mucus fistula or closed just beneath the skin as a subcutaneous mucus fistula, figure 75.6. Alternatively, it can be closed off with staples across the upper rectum at the pelvic brim and rectal decompression achieved via a transanal catheter. This operation has the advantage that the patient avoids the risks of pelvic dissection while unwell and that colonic histology can be assessed to distinguish between UC and CD. Restorative surgery can be contemplated at a later date when the patient is no longer on steroids and has fully recovered. The mesentery should be divided where convenient and there is no evidence for or against preservation of the omentum in the laparoscopic era, when resection or preservation is a matter of surgical convenience. Most surgeons would recommend closed dissection for UC and a greater degree of mesocolic resection for CD given the potential role for the mesentery. Postulated in CD. Dissection of the left colon is continued to divide the sigmoid at a level that will comfortably reach the skin as a mucus fistula unless this part of the bowel is severely diseased, in which case resection at the sacral promontory is the preferred approach. Urgent subtotal colectomy for acute severe colitis can be performed laparoscopically, provided the surgeon and theatre team have adequate experience, with care to avoid perforation when handling friable bowel with laparoscopic instruments. Emergency colectomy for septic complications of acute severe colitis should be carried out in a timely fashion and should not be delayed pending availability of laparoscopic colorectal expertise. Proctectomy is rarely needed in the urgent or emergency situation and should be avoided as pelvic dissection of the diseased rectum is difficult, carries risks to bladder and sexual function, prolongs the surgery in a critically ill patient, increases the risk of mortality and reduces the potential for later restorative surgery. Fulminant colitis, a toxic megacolon, can also occur in CD, but less frequently than in UC. Without a pre-established diagnosis, distinction is usually not possible unless there is clear radiological evidence of small bowel CD or clinically apparent perianal CD. In the urgent setting, subtotal colectomy for pancolitis should be performed as for UC, preferably with omental resection and a more radical approach to the mesentery. In situations where a diagnosis of colonic CD is established, a more tailored segmental resection may be considered in highly selected patients. Primary anastomosis should be avoided in the acute setting and in immunosuppressed patients. Elective. In the elective setting, the following operations are available. All of these can be successfully performed laparoscopically in experienced hands. Filled circle subtotal colectomy and ileostomy, as in an urgent colectomy. Filled circle proctocolectomy and permanent end ileostomy. Filled circle restorative proctocolectomy with ileal pouch anal anastomosis, IPAA. Filled circle subtotal colectomy and ileorectal anastomosis. Filled circle segmental colectomy, Crohn's colitis only. Segmental resections are not recommended for UC as, even when the right colon is not obviously involved, there is a high recurrence rate in the remaining colon. Segmental colonic resection may be considered in selected patients with isolated CD. Subtotal colectomy with ileostomy is performed electively in frail patients, patients who cannot be weaned from steroids and when there is doubt as to the underlying diagnosis. In such situations, restorative surgery or completion proctectomy can be considered at a future date. Complications of CD including fibrotic strictures not amenable to endoscopic dilatation and enteric fistulae are common indications for elective surgery in patients with CD. Patients who have previously undergone emergency resection and stoma formation will also require follow-up for counseling about restoration of bowel continuity. Preoperative optimization and timing of surgery. For many patients who require surgical intervention for colitis, the timing of surgery will be a critical part of shared decision-making between clinicians and patient. In the elective setting, patients will want to plan surgery around social, educational, family and work commitments to minimize the impact of surgery and post-operative recovery on their lives. As proctectomy carries small but recognized risks to sexual function and fertility, patients may choose to defer surgery until after completing their families or consider sperm, oocyte or embryo storage to allow assisted fertility at a later date. Steroid therapy in both UC and Crohn's colitis increases the risk of postoperative complications, although it is difficult to quantify this effect. Patients treated with steroids have an increased risk of infectious complications and poor healing. It is likely that there is a dose-related aspect to this phenomenon. In view of this, steroid use should be reduced as much as possible prior to surgery, preferably below 10 mg prednisolone per day, particularly if an anastomosis is planned. Both anti-TNF-alpha and anti-integrin biological therapies also increase the risk of postoperative complications and should be discontinued wherever possible between 14 and 30 days prior to surgery. Venous thromboembolism prophylaxis. Patients with IBD have a threefold increased risk of venous thromboembolism compared with the general population, and this risk increases in patients who require surgery. The rate of thromboembolic events after surgery for IBD is around 3%, with the strongest predictors of thromboembolic complications being stoma formation, preoperative steroid therapy, ileoanal pouch formation and increased length of stay. The risk of venous thromboembolism is higher in patients with UC than in those with CD. Because of the increased risk of venous thromboembolism, extended chemoprophylaxis has been recommended with low molecular weight heparin used for up to 28 days after any abdominal procedure for IBD. Proctocolectomy and ileostomy. This operation removes the entire colon and rectum and, by doing so, removes any risk of colorectal neoplasia or colotic symptoms. It results in a permanent ileostomy. It has a lower complication rate than an ileal pouch procedure, although the perineal wound can be problematic, 10% fail to heal, and stoma problems are common. It is indicated for patients who are not candidates for restorative surgery owing to impaired anal sphincter function, comorbidities or patient preference. The colectomy is performed as above. In UC, provided there is no concern regarding rectal cancer, a close rectal dissection may be performed to minimize damage to the pelvic nerves, avoiding erectile and bladder dysfunction. Recent evidence suggests that the mesorectum should be excised when proctectomy is performed in CD, as the mesentery itself may be involved in the inflammatory process and delay perineal healing. In UC without dysplasia or cancer present, an intersphincteric dissection of the anal canal should be performed. This results in a smaller perineal wound and fewer healing problems. In CD, wider excision of the anal canal and diseased perineum may be required if perianal disease is present. A permanent end ileostomy is formed. The position of the ileostomy should be carefully sited preoperatively with the expert guidance of a stoma nurse specialist. Restorative proctocolectomy with ileal pouch anal anastomosis. Although restoration of bowel continuity by ileoanal anastomosis was FRST performed by Nissen in 1933 and later by Ravitch and Sebastian, the functional outcomes were poor and the operation was rarely performed. The combination of improved surgical techniques, better understanding of the physiology of fecal continence and the relative success of the continent ileostomy operation, Koch pouch, led Parkes and Nichols in the 1970s to reintroduce the concept of IPA-FRST promulgated by Bacon in the 1950s. Parkes and Nichols devised an S pouch and later A W pouch configuration. However, these have been generally superseded by the J pouch described by Utsunomiya, which is technically easier to construct and avoids a potentially obstructing efferent limb from the pouch reservoir, figure 75.7. Early pouch surgery included dissection of the rectal muscularis propria, mucosal proctectomy, but it is now clear that continence is better if the mucosa immediately above the dentate line, anal transitional zone, is preserved. A distal mucosectomy to the upper anal canal with anastomosis at the dentate line is now reserved for patients with rectal mucosal dysplasia and selectively for patients in whom the operation is performed for familial adenomatous polyposis, FAP, see Chapter 77. Usually the anastomosis is double stapled to the top of the anal canal, preserving the upper anal mucosa, figure 75.8, although a hand-sewn pull-through anastomosis is also possible. Care must be taken to ensure that the anastomosis is to the anal canal and not the distal rectum, as residual informed mucosa behind may cause persistent symptoms, so-called cuftus. IPAA is usually performed as a two-stage procedure with a covering loop ileostomy that may be closed at an interval once pouch healing has been confirmed, usually by means of a gastrograph, water-soluble, contrast enema radiograph. In patients who have previously undergone an urgent colectomy or those with IC in whom a colectomy had provided a definitive diagnosis of UC, the operation is considered to have been a three-stage procedure. In highly selected individuals whose operation is elective and immunosuppressive medication has been discontinued, a one-stage operation without ileostomy may be considered. The modified two-stage approach of initial subtotal colectomy and end ileostomy followed by proctectomy with pouch formation and without diversion is the standard of practice in many specialist centers. Postoperative complications include pelvic infection, usually resulting from a leak at the ileoanal anastomosis or, in A, J, pouch, from the top of the J, postoperative small bowel obstruction, which may occur in as many as 10 to 15% of patients, and pouch vaginal fistula. The frequency of evacuation is determined by pouch volume, completeness of emptying, reservoir inflammation and intrinsic small bowel motility, but is typically between 3 and 8 evacuations in each 24-hour period, of which at least one evacuation is nocturnal. Stool frequency, urgency and minor fecal incontinence are common, but usually reduce with time. As ileal pouch capacity increases, the majority of patients with IPAA have a very good quality of life. The main reasons for pouch failure are pelvic infection, poor functional outcome and pouchitis, see below. Follow-up of patients with IPAA shows that, although the functional outcome may deteriorate with aging, between 85% and 90% of patients retain their IPAA in the long term. Women of reproductive age should be advised of potentially reduced fertility, as well as vaginal dryness, owing to denervation of the secretory glands of the vaginal mucosa. Laparoscopic or robotic techniques may reduce this effect. However, women who have not completed their family may elect for a colectomy with ileostomy and IPAA at a later date. Pouchitis is inflammation of the ileal pouch mucosa that occurs to varying degrees in up to 50% of patients who undergo IPAA for UC. Interestingly, pouchitis is exceedingly rare after IPAA for FAP, suggesting that there is an inherent enteric mucosal pro-inflammatory response to an altered gut-associated microbiome following IPAA for UC. Pouchitis usually responds to a short course of antibiotic therapy, notably with metronidazole or ciprofloxacin, and can be followed by maintenance with probiotics. In a small percentage of patients, 3 to 5%, pouchitis is recurrent or persistent such that pouch excision may be necessary. In such cases, previously undiagnosed CD and pouch ischemia should be considered as alternative diagnoses. Cock ileal pouch reservoir. The cock pouch was originally designed as a continent urostomy but later adapted as a continent ileostomy for patients following proctocolectomy for IBD. The technique confirmed the safety of a small bowel reservoir. but difficulties with prolapse of the nipple valve mechanism required for continence and the success of IPA as a mechanism to retain continence and anatomical continuity has meant that the operation is now rarely performed. Colectomy and ileorectal anastomosis. This procedure is occasionally performed in UC if there is minimal rectal inflammation. A very considerable percentage, at least 50%, of patients with a quiescent rectum after total colectomy will develop significant mucosal inflammation in the rectum once the fecal stream has been re-established. Although rectal inflammation can be controlled with medical treatment, functional results may be disappointing. If the rectum is preserved, then annual rectal inspection is advocated. This procedure has the advantage of avoiding the stoma and the risk to sexual function associated with rectal dissection, and so may provide a useful transition in highly selected patients. Figure 75.8 step. Indeterminate colitis. Approximately 1 in 10 patients with colitis presents with histological features that make their disease difficult to characterize. While the clinical history may suggest the diagnosis in some cases, for example, a history of recurrent perianal sepsis and fistulation would make a diagnosis of CD more likely, in others it may remain unclear whether a patient has UC or CD. In such cases, it may still be appropriate to offer IPAA after detailed informed consent, but the risks of pouch failure appear to be significantly higher, up to 25 to 30%, and patients should be advised accordingly. Crohn's disease, regional enteritis. Chronic inflammatory disease of the ileum, possibly FRST, recognized by Morgagni in 1761 and described separately by Liziniowski and DL in the early 20th century, is known as Crohn's disease after a key publication by Crohn, Ginsberg and Oppenheimer in 1932. It is characterized by a chronic full-thickness inflammatory process that can affect any part of the gastrointestinal tract from the lips to the anal margin. It is most common in North America and Northern Europe, with an annual incidence of 8 per 100,000. CD is slightly more common in women and is most frequently diagnosed between the ages of 25 and 40 years. There is a second peak of incidence around the age of 70 years. The prevalence is highest among white people, notably in North America and Northwestern Europe. CD is less common in Central Europe. And less prevalent still in South America and Africa. The incidence is rising in Asia, which is attributed to increased urbanization. There are differences in clinical manifestations in Asian populations, with a higher male predominance, more perianal involvement, fewer extraintestinal manifestations and worse clinical outcomes. The prevalence of CD seems to be 3 to 4 times higher in the Ashkenazi Jewish population, although it is lower in the Jewish population in Israel, suggesting the importance of environmental factors. Etiology. The etiology of CD remains incompletely understood but is thought to involve a complex interplay of genetic and environmental factors. Although CD shares some features with chronic infections, particularly tuberculosis, no causative organism has ever been demonstrated. There is an intriguing similarity to John's disease of cattle, a chronic inflammatory enteropathy resulting from infection with Mycobacterium paratuberculosis, suggesting that CD may have a related etiology. Some studies have identified mycobacterial DNA more frequently in tissue from patients with CD than in tissue from controls, but trials have not demonstrated any therapeutic benefit of treating CD with antituberculous drugs. A wide variety of foods in a highly refined diet have been implicated in CD, however, no conclusive link has been proven. There is considerable recent interest in food additives, particularly preservatives that may support a pro-inflammatory dysbiosis in the gut microbiome. An association with high levels of sanitation in childhood has also been implicated. Smoking increases the relative risk of CD threefold and is an exacerbating factor after diagnosis, contrary to the protective effect seen in UC. Smoking cessation has a beneficial effect on disease activity comparable to that of medical therapies and is therefore an essential component in the effective management of CD. Genetic factors are important in CD. Approximately 10% of patients have a FRST degree relative with the disease, and concordance approaches 50% in monozygotic twins. Inheritance is thought to involve multiple genes with low penetrance. Variants of NOD2, CARD15, a gene involved in intracellular recognition of bacteria, have been shown to have a strong association with CD. Recent genome-wide association studies have identified activation of over 200 genes in IBD, some of which are associated with CD and others with UC. Most patients have no identifiable germline mutational signature, and epigenetic mutations are more likely to be involved. Both UC and CD are associated with alterations in the gut microbiome, with generally decreased microbial diversity. New techniques including next-generation 16S ribosomal RNA sequencing allow detailed analysis of individual microbial communities within the gut with sequential studies informing changes that might be associated with disease activity. Despite over a decade of intense study, no definitive signature of either CD or UC has been established, other than reduced microbial diversity, particularly in CD. Pathogenesis in both CD and UC. Increased gut mucosal permeability appears to develop at a relatively early stage and may lead to increased passage of luminal antigens that induce a cell-mediated inflammatory response. Pro-inflammatory cytokines, such as interleukin-2 and tumor necrosis factor, are then released. It has been suggested that CD is associated with a defect in suppressor T cells. It is unclear whether the proposed increase in intestinal permeability is a cause or consequence of the disease process. Animal studies have suggested that the increase in gut permeability develops because of changes in bacterial recognition proteins and an increase in inflammatory gene activation before macroscopic evidence of inflammation develops. Studies of healthy and apparently unaffected first-degree relatives of patients with CD suggest that gut permeability is increased, which in turn suggests that a genetically determined increase in gut permeability, perhaps combined with an abnormal immune-mediated response to colonization of the gut with enteric microflora, may initiate the disease. Pathology. The terminal ileum is the most commonly affected segment of bowel in patients with CD, often occurring in combination with other areas of disease. More proximal small bowel is less frequently involved. Colitis alone occurs in up to 1/3 of cases. The stomach and duodenum are affected in around 5% of cases, but perianal lesions are common, affecting up to 50% of patients. Perianal disease occurs in 25% of patients with small bowel disease and in 75% of patients with Crohn's colitis. Macroscopically, CD is characterized by fibrotic thickening of the intestinal wall with narrowing, stricturing of the lumen and fat wrapping, encroachment of mesenteric fat around the bowel, figure 75.9. There is usually dilated bowel just proximal to the stricture and deep mucosal ulcerations with linear or serpiginous, snake-like patterns in the strictured area itself. Edema between ulcers gives rise to a characteristic cobblestone appearance of the mucosa, figure 75.10. The transmural inflammation, a pathognomonic feature of CD, may lead to segments of bowel becoming adherent to each other and to surrounding structures, forming inflammatory masses with mesenteric abscesses and effistulation into adjacent organs, figure 75.11. The serosa is usually opaque, with thickening of the mesentery and enlarged mesenteric lymph nodes. CD is characteristically discontinuous, with inflamed areas separated by apparently normal intestine, so-called skip lesions. Microscopically focal areas of chronic inflammation, involving all layers of the intestinal wall with lymphoid aggregates, are characteristic of CD. Non-casseting giant cell granulomas found in 60% of patients are pathognomonic of CD, figure 75.2. They are most commonly seen in anorectal disease. Multifocal arterial occlusions are found in thickened muscularis propria. There may be nerve cell hyperplasia and deep, effuring ulceration within affected areas. Characteristically, and unlike in UC, there may be completely normal areas immediately next to areas of severe inflammation. Clinical features. The clinical presentation depends on the pattern of disease. Occasionally, CD presents acutely with ileal inflammation in symptoms and signs resembling those of acute appendicitis or, much less commonly, free perforation of the small intestine resulting in a local or diffuse peritonitis. CD may present with acute severe colitis, but this is considerably less common than in UC. Small bowel CD often presents with bouts of abdominal pain and mild diarrhea. A tender mass may be palpable in the right iliac fossa. Intermittent fever, anemia and weight loss are common. After months of repeated attacks characterized by acute inflammation, the affected area of intestine stenoses with fibrosis, causing chronic obstructive symptoms. Children developing the illness before puberty may have retarded growth and sexual development. As CD progresses, transmural fissurae, intra-abdominal abscesses and fistulae may develop. Fistulation may occur into adjacent loops of bowel, enteroenteric or interloop fistulae. Occasionally, a mobile loop of sigmoid loop may become adherent to the affected terminal ileum, resulting in iliosigmoid fistulation, figure 75.11. The fistula tracts in such cases are usually small, and the profuse diarrhea that results from iliosigmoid fistulation is due primarily to bacterial overgrowth, attributable to colonization of the small bowel with colonic fora, rather than passage of small bowel content into the colon. Fistulation may also occur into the bladder, enterovesicle, the female genital tract or, less commonly, the duodenum. Fistulation to the abdominal wall, enterocutaneous fistula, may also develop spontaneously or following appendicectomy in unrecognized CD, but more commonly presents as a complication of abdominal surgery. Colonic Crohn's disease, figure 75.10. Crohn. Colonic involvement is found in 30% of patients with CD, frequently in association with perianal disease, and may coexist with small bowel pathology. Colonic CD presents with symptoms of colitis and proctitis as described for UC, although toxic megacolon is much less common. Colonic strictures may form just as are seen in small bowel CD. Endoscopic dilatation may be performed in expert hands as an alternative to surgical resection. Distinguishing between CD and UC is often difficult and requires clinical and pathological patterns to be combined. The presence of skip lesions, rectal sparing, non-casseting granulomas or perianal disease will point to CD, figure 75.12. Many patients with CD present with perianal problems. In the presence of active disease, the perianal skin can have a bluish tinge. Large, edematous and infant skin tags are common. Fissures and superficial ulcers with undermined edges are relatively painless and can heal with bridging of epithelium. Deep cavitating ulcers are usually found in the upper anal canal. They can be painful and cause perianal abscesses and fistulae. Fistulation through the posterior wall of the vagina may lead to rectovaginal fistula and continuous leakage of gas and/or feces per vagina. The rectal mucosa is often spared in CD and will feel normal on rectal examination. If involved, it may feel thickened, nodular and irregular. Severe CD proctitis may occasionally be mistaken for cancer. Perianal disease is frequently associated with dense, fibrous stricturing, stenosis, at the anorectal junction. Incontinence may develop because of destruction of the anal sphincter musculature owing to inflammation, abscess formation, fibrosis and repeated surgical drainage. In severe cases, the perineum may become densely fibrotic, rigid and covered with multiple discharging openings, watering can perineum. Each patient with CD should have their disease phenotype. Manifestations, classified according to the Montreal Classification, Table 75.3. This is important as it allows an overview of disease progression in the individual patient over time, and enables group comparisons and evaluations. The Montreal Classification specifies age at diagnosis, behavior and disease location. Extraintestinal manifestations. The extraintestinal manifestations of CD are similar to those that occur in UC. Primary sclerosing cholangitis is relatively rare in CD, compared with UC. Gallstones are common. As an infant or absent, because of resection, terminal ileum leads to reduced absorption of bile salts. Amyloidosis is common but is rarely symptomatic. Metastatic CD can occur in the vagina and/or skin with nodular ulcers, which demonstrate non-casseting granulomas when biopsied. Such cutaneous CD can be virtually indistinguishable macroscopically from hidradenitis suppurativa. Investigations. Laboratory. A full blood count should be performed as anemia is common, resulting from iron deficiency owing to blood loss, malabsorption or chronic disease. Vitamin B12 and folate deficiency may occur as a consequence of terminal ileal disease or resection. Active inflammatory disease is usually associated with low serum albumin, magnesium, zinc and selenium. Acute phase protein measurements, C-reactive protein, and erythrocyte sedimentation rate may correlate with disease activity. An elevated fecal concentration of calprotectin, a protein marker of mucosal inflammation, may support a diagnosis of CD in patients with new onset of persistent gastrointestinal symptoms. It can also be used to monitor disease activity in the long-term management of established CD. Endoscopy. Colonoscopic examination may be normal or show patchy inflammation. Characteristically, there are areas of normal mucosa in between areas of inflammation that are irregular and ulcerated, with a mucopurulent exudate. The earliest offendings are often aphthous ulcers surrounded by a rim of erythematous mucosa. These become larger and deeper with increasing severity of disease. There may be stricturing, and it is important to exclude malignancy at these sites by multiple and often repeated mucosal biopsies. An irregular Crohn's stricture with polypoid mucosa may be almost macroscopically indistinguishable from malignancy. The terminal ileum may be ulcerated and strictured. In patients who have had previous ileocecal resection and anastomosis, recurrent disease usually presents FRST with aphthous ulceration just proximal to the anastomosis. Interval colonoscopy is therefore important in the follow-up after surgery for CD. Upper gastrointestinal symptoms may require upper gastrointestinal endoscopy, which may reveal deep longitudinal ulcers and cobblestoning of the mucosa in the duodenum, stomach or, rarely, in the esophagus or mouth. Enteroscopy may reveal jejunal ulceration and stricturing. Capsule endoscopy, which allows visualization of the entire small intestinal mucosa by telemetry, has a useful role in those patients with evidence of chronic gastrointestinal symptoms or blood loss and where no evidence of ulceration can be found with MO. Conventional endoscopic assessment. Investigation of the small intestine by capsule endoscopy should not be undertaken when there is a suspicion of stricture because of the possibility of the capsule becoming impacted in the narrow segment. A biodegradable test capsule can be used if this is a source of concern. Imaging. High-resolution ultrasound in expert hands can demonstrate inflamed and thickened bowel loops as well as fluid collections and abscesses, the string sign of Cantor, figure 75.13. CT scans with oral contrast are widely used in the investigation of abdominal symptoms and can demonstrate fistulae, intra-abdominal abscesses and bowel thickening or dilatation. Magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, is useful in assessing complex perianal disease and has been shown to be an excellent method for investigating the small bowel. Magnetic resonance enterography, oral contrast, or enteroclysis, contrast administered via nasoduodenal tube, is particularly effective at demonstrating small bowel stricturing, including the string sign of Cantor, and avoids the need for repeated exposure to large doses of ionizing radiation in young patients, figure 75.14. A labeled white cell scan is occasionally of value to determine whether or not a segment of bowel is actively inflamed and to guide decisions on medical treatment. In patients with an enterocutaneous fistula, fistulography. may help to demonstrate the anatomy and complexity of the FS tumor and allow adequate planning for future surgery. Medical treatment: steroids. Corticosteroids are widely used to treat acute phases of CD. They induce remission in 70 to 80% of cases of moderate to severe disease. They should be used in short courses and tapered once a response has been achieved. They reduce inflammation and are therefore ineffective in established fibrostenotic disease. Steroid enemas may be used in the rectum, where the benefits include reduced systemic bioavailability, although long-term use may still cause adrenal suppression. Oral steroid formulations such as budesonide have been devised, where the steroid moiety is removed in the portal circulation, thus reducing systemic side effects. Steroids should not be used as maintenance therapy and are usually replaced with immunomodulatory agents to minimize the risk of side effects associated with long-term steroid use. Aminosalicylates. Colonic symptoms can be treated by 5-ASA agents in a similar manner to those in UC. These agents have limited efficacy in small bowel CD. Antibiotics. Metronidazole and ciprofloxacin may be used, particularly for periods of a few weeks at a time, especially in perianal disease. Long-term use of metronidazole should be avoided as there is a risk of peripheral neuropathy. Ciprofloxacin also has significant side effects when used in the long term, including tendinitis and tendon rupture. Antibiotics may be used to treat an inflammatory mass or an abscess. In general, however, a confirmed abscess should be treated by percutaneous drainage and/or surgery, as antibiotics alone will not treat a Crohn's mass effectively. Immunomodulatory agents: azathioprine is used for its additive and steroid-sparing effects and currently represents standard maintenance therapy. It is a purine analog, which is metabolized to 6-MP, and works by inhibiting cell-mediated immune responses. See medical treatment of ulcerative colitis. Cyclosporin acts by inhibiting cell-mediated immunity. Short-course intravenous cyclosporin treatment is associated with remission in 80%, however, there is relapse after completion of treatment in many cases. Methotrexate is a drug that has a wide effect on DNA synthesis and immune signaling and can also be used in CD, although it is used less frequently in the biological era. Monoclonal antibody biologic therapy: infliximab, a murine chimeric anti-TNF-alpha monoclonal antibody, and adalimumab, an entirely human anti-TNF-alpha monoclonal antibody, are widely used to induce remission in moderately severe and severe CD. Third-generation monoclonal antibody therapies vedolizumab and etrolizumab prevent leukocyte migration preferentially in the gastrointestinal tract and may therefore have fewer side effects. More recently, ustekinumab has entered widespread use as a CD therapy. It targets interleukin-12/23 to dampen the autoimmune system. Monoclonal antibody therapy is currently widely used for induction and maintenance of remission. Early and aggressive use in patients at high risk for early recrudescent disease after surgery, for example, penetrating phenotype, early mucosal inflammation or aphthous ulceration at follow-up colonoscopy, may reduce, or at least postpone, the need for subsequent surgery. Perforation and abscess formation are usually regarded as contraindications to the use of biological therapy, although biologicals may be safely used after percutaneous drainage. While biologicals may reduce inflammation and may occasionally achieve healing of fistula openings in anal disease, the fistula tracts may remain patent and cessation of therapy is associated with a high risk of reactivation. Care must be taken before starting biological therapy to ensure that there is no active sepsis and that a diagnosis of intestinal tuberculosis has been excluded. See Chapter 65. Nutritional support. Nutritional support is frequently required in CD. Patients with moderate nutritional impairment will require nutritional supplementation, and severely malnourished patients may require enteral tube or even parenteral nutrition. Anemia, hypoproteinemia and electrolyte vitamin and metabolic bone problems must all be addressed. Elemental diet or parenteral nutrition can induce remission in up to 80% of patients, an effect comparable to steroids, but almost all patients relapse rapidly after cessation of therapy. Nutritional optimization has been shown to improve surgical outcomes, but it is important to recognize that a significant improvement in nutritional status is unlikely in the setting of active infection and, in patients with abscesses, effective drainage remains the overwhelming priority. Endoscopic dilatation in Crohn's disease. Although penetrating disease will often require surgical resection, stricturing may be amenable to endoscopic treatment. This may be accomplished by enteroscopy or colonoscopy, depending on the site of the stricture. Dilatation of an infant ulcerated stricture is contraindicated because of the risks of perforation, but balloon dilatation of fibrostenotic disease may result in substantial symptomatic improvement and obviate the need for surgery in selected cases. It is most suited for short, less than 5 cm fibrostenotic strictures, including those seen at a previous anastomosis. Indications for surgery. Population-based studies show that approximately 70% of patients with CD will require a bowel resection in the FRST decade after diagnosis, and 40% will require a further resection in the decade after their index resection. Recent population-based data in the era of monoclonal antibodies suggest that the incidence of surgery may be falling, but surgery nevertheless remains a key component of treatment. Surgical resection will not cure CD. Surgery therefore focuses on managing the complications of the disease. Summary box 75.2. As many of these indications for surgery may be relative, joint management by an aggressive physician and a conservative surgeon is ideal, and decisions regarding surgical intervention are best made by a multidisciplinary team in consultation with the patient and recognizing their preferences. The fundamental principle is to preserve healthy gut and to maintain adequate function. Intestinal resection should be kept to the minimum required to treat the local consequences of disease to mitigate against the potential for short bowel syndrome. See Chapter 91. In laparoscopic surgery, it may be more difficult to assess the full length of the small intestine, so up-to-date preoperative small bowel imaging is important. While surgery carries perioperative risks, it also carries significant benefits, notably in patients with isolated terminal ileal disease, in whom a prolonged period of good health may be achieved. The relative benefits of surgical resection and long-term medical therapy in CD can be very finely balanced and require careful consideration and discussion with the patient within the setting of a combined gastroenterological and surgical IBD clinic. Principles of management of CD. Filled circle. Close liaison between physician and surgeon is crucial. Filled circle. Both medical and surgical treatment options should be considered. However, surgery should not be delayed when there is a clear indication. Filled circle patients must be optimized prior to surgery. This may include radiological drainage of sepsis, antibiotic treatment and nutritional support. Filled circle CD is a chronic relapsing disease with a high likelihood of reparation. The surgeon must take every reasonable effort to preserve bowel length and sphincter function. Filled circle. Shared decision-making with patients to accommodate their treatment preferences. Occasionally unsuspected ileal inflammation is found during emergency appendicectomy. Determining whether or not to resect the ileum in this situation is a complex clinical decision that should be made by a senior surgeon. This decision involves an assessment of the likelihood that the ileitis is an expression of CD rather than another etiology such as Yersinia infection, an assessment of the likelihood of remission with medical therapy rather than surgery, risk of interocutaneous effistulation from appendiceal base leakage, and an assessment of the rest of the small bowel for the presence of additional sites of inflammation. In the current era of monoclonal therapy, it would be controversial to resect uncomplicated terminal ileitis found during an emergency procedure for suspected appendicitis, as this is likely to respond to medical therapy. If reasonably safe, appendicectomy is now encouraged for histological confirmation in limited previously undiagnosed disease, with appendicectomy carried out using a laparoscopic stapler to reduce the risk of enterocutaneous fistula, see Chapter 76. The course of CD after surgery is unpredictable, but recrudescence, a better term than recurrence, is common. Symptomatic recrudescence does not seem to be related to the presence of disease at the resection line. The cumulative probability of recrudescence requiring surgery for ileal disease is approximately 20%, 40%, 60% and 80% at 5, 10, 15 and 20 years, respectively, after a previous resection. Surgery for CD is technically demanding as the involved mesentery is thickened and edematous and healing may be impaired, see Chapter 65. The patient may be malnourished, on immunosuppressants or have active infection, sepsis, or potentially all three. Decision-making regarding the timing and nature of surgery to be undertaken is key to a satisfactory outcome of surgical treatment, and frequently requires experience and multidisciplinary discussion with other healthcare professionals and, most importantly, the patient. A key decision must be made whether to anastomose the apparently healthy bowel ends after macroscopically apparent disease has been resected, as anastomotic leaks and fistulation represent a considerable problem after surgery for CD. Intra-abdominal septic complications are more common if one or more of the following risk factors are present. Current high-dose steroid therapy, greater than 10 mg prednisolone for greater than 4 weeks before surgery. Filled circle current or very recent, less than 14 days, preoperative monoclonal antibody therapy. Filled circle preoperative significant weight loss, greater than 10% promorbid weight. Filled circle coexisting abdominal sepsis, notably an abscess or fistula. Filled circle low serum albumin less than 30 grams per liter. If any risk factors are present, and particularly if more than one risk factor is present as the risks appear to be additive, one should consider exteriorizing the bowel to create a stoma, with distal segment closure left close to the ileostomy site, and plan a delayed anastomosis when the risk factors have been corrected. Ileocecal or colonic resections can be undertaken laparoscopically, with the potential advantage of smaller incisions and potentially shorter recovery time. Reparative surgery. Is technically demanding an ileosigmoid or ilioduodenal adhesions in fistulae can be difficult to safely dissect laparoscopically. Laparotomy should be considered in this setting. Although CD is usually regarded as a contraindication to ileal pouch surgery, the other options, panproctocolectomy or total colectomy with ileorectal anastomosis, are frequently appropriate and there may be considerable rectal sparing in CD, justifying the latter. Where the diagnosis of CD is firmly established, segmental rather than total colectomy may be appropriate. The range of operations performed for CD depends on the pattern of disease. The most common are outlined below. Filled circle ileocecal resection is the usual procedure for terminal ileal disease, with a primary anastomosis between the ileum and the ascending or transverse colon, depending on the extent of the disease. Ileostomy without primary anastomosis is indicated if the patient is unwell, has active infection or is nutritionally depleted. Filled circle segmental resection of short segments of small or large bowel strictures can be performed. Filled circle colectomy and ileorectal anastomosis may be undertaken for colonic CD with rectal sparing and a normal anus. Filled circle subtotal colectomy and ileostomy for Crohn's colitis accounts for 8% of such procedures for acute colonic disease. The indications are similar to those for UC. Filled circle temporary loop ileostomy. This can be used either in patients with acute distal CD, allowing remission and later restoration of continuity, or in patients with severe perianal or rectal disease. Filled circle panproctocolectomy. Many patients with severe anal disease failing to respond to medical treatment will eventually require a permanent colostomy. When this occurs in a setting of severe colonic disease, proctocolectomy and permanent ileostomy may be required. Structuroplasty. Structured areas of CD, figure 75.15, can be treated by structuroplasty, a local widening procedure, to avoid small bowel resection and is thus an important bowel sparing technique. Structuroplasty is particularly useful for the treatment of fibro-stenotic disease when there is little or no active inflammation in the involved segment. Structuroplasty is contraindicated in the presence of a phlegmon, Crohn's-associated cancer or hemorrhage due to mucosal ulceration. If there is any concern about malignancy at the site of a stricture, then frozen biopsy carried out intraoperatively may allow a structuroplasty to take place rather than resection, although resection and formal histological assessment remains the better option if there is any doubt. Multiple structuroplasties can be performed and structuroplasty can be combined with resection. The Hind-Mikulich technique of an antimesenteric longitudinal incision that is closed transversely is the most common technique. A Finney antimesenteric side-to-side anastomosis is used to treat long segments of stenosis when preservation of bowel length is important, figure 75.15b. Recent clinical research has pointed towards the importance of the mesentery in disease recurrence following resection, see Chapter 65. Complete excision of macroscopically diseased mesentery may reduce the incidence of recurrence, as may anastomotic techniques that ensure that an anastomosis is fashioned on the antimesenteric aspect of the bowel, Kono-S procedure. Irrespective of the site of resection or anastomotic technique used, it is important to follow patients closely in the postoperative months to ensure that recrudescence of CD is identified at a very early stage and medical treatment reinstituted. A strong case can be made for restarting prophylactic biological treatment subject to endoscopic review at 6 months following resection. Perianal Crohn's disease. Perianal CD is distressing and often debilitating for patients. The most common presentation is with a perianal abscess, perianal swelling, redness and pain, followed by discharge of pus or fecal drainage to perianal skin or vagina, representing RF fistulous connection. Management requires a combination of medical and surgical treatments. The role of surgery is to control infection in the FRST instance, and later to minimize recurrent infection, reduce drainage and to offer potential for F fistular cure. If a F fistula is seen at the time of abscess drainage, a seton may be placed. Otherwise, further examination under anesthesia will be required for placement of draining setons by an experienced colorectal surgeon. MRI may aid identification of occult F fistulae or sources of ongoing sepsis. Long-term drainage with setons prevents further tissue loss from undrained infection but also allows safe initiation of biological therapy. Infliximab or adalimumab therapy may be combined with seton insertion in the early phase of management of perianal F fistulae. Once F fistular discharge has reduced, typically after 2 or 3 doses, the seton can be removed. Laying open of F fistulae, F fistulotomy, commonly performed for F fistulae resulting from the more common cryptoglandular perianal abscess, should generally be avoided in CD as the wound edges heal poorly. Potentially curative surgical options include advancement FAPS, F-Brin glue, F fistular plugs, ligation of the intersphincteric. F fistular tract, lift, and adipose-derived stem cell injection coupled with sutured closure of the internal F fistular opening. The over-the-scope clip, OTSC, and video-assisted anal F fistular treatment, VAAFT, have only been used in small numbers of patients, see Chapter 80. Injection of adipose-derived mesenchymal stem cells into tissue surrounding complex anal F fistular tracts is well tolerated and when used in combination with established treatments may increase F fistular healing rates. The mechanisms of action are uncertain but are thought to relate to regenerative and anti-inflammatory cytokines produced by stem cells. The treatment is expensive and further trials are needed. A diverting stoma may offer significant quality of life benefit in selected patients and should be offered to symptomatic patients in the presence of intractable symptomatic perianal disease or proctitis, or failure to control perianal sepsis. Proctectomy is a good option for some patients, and a permanent stoma should not be viewed as a treatment failure, as it may again offer significant improvement in quality of life in selected patients. Rectovaginal fistulae hardly ever close with medical management alone, and surgery to repair rectovaginal fistulae has relatively low success rates. Failure of surgical repair may result in further deterioration in symptoms if there is additional loss of functional anorectal, vaginal or perineal tissue, and ultimately stoma rates are high in this group of patients. Ileal pouch vaginal fistula. Ileal pouch vaginal fistula is most commonly due to an anastomotic complication. However, a delayed presentation may reflect an underlying diagnosis of CD rather than UC. Management depends on cause. Biological therapy for CD, diverting ileostomy if there is complex sepsis, and definitive repair with interposition of native tissue if the sepsis resolves and CD has been excluded. Duodenal Crohn's disease. The duodenum is an uncommon site for CDN involvement. Is more commonly the result of inflammation in another part of the bowel as a bystander effect, secondary. This can often be managed by resection of the source of the fistula with direct duodenal repair if the defect is small, or closure using an omental patch, or duodenojejunostomy if the defect is sizable. Duodenal strictures may be amenable to endoscopic balloon dilatation. However, stricturoplasty, bypass gastrojejunostomy or gastroduodenostomy may be required. Specialization in inflammatory bowel disease surgery. Many general surgeons have relatively little experience in managing patients with IBD. High-volume centers have lower morbidity and mortality rates after colectomy for emergency surgery for IBD and after primary ileocecal resection for CD. Specialist units also have a lower failure rate following IPAA and are more likely to offer subsequent restorative surgery, rather than permanent stoma, for patients who have required emergency colectomy. Less common aspects of IBD surgery, including the need for revision or excision pouch surgery, rectovaginal fistula management, cock pouch formation or care of adolescent patients, require specialist expertise to achieve good outcomes.